I'm making a series of videos. Some are going to be directed towards Christians and pastors, and other issues are going to be just addressed to people in general, unbelievers. But first, I want to address the church and Christians, pastors. And what I'm about to say may step on some of your toes, but I want you to hear me out. Um, Jesus said in the last days that he's going to pour out his spirit among all men. And as we know, the church over the years has really lost members, has lost interest in people, just have no interest in the church anymore. And the world, if you look at it, the world sees Christians as people who are hateful. People in the church, we talk about the love of God, um, and yet our actions don't show that love towards certain groups of people. And the church nowadays is mostly filled with um, baby boomers, Gen X, and you see the millennials and younger generations just turning away from the church completely. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is their perception of the church and how they treat people in general. And I think it's important that we really look at that. Um, if we believe as Christians that there is an eternal hell and that the majority of the people in this world are not saved, and all we do is sit here and condemn them, then shame on us. We're sending the wrong message. This world is filled with confusion, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and suffering, and a lot of it, to be quite blunt, came from the church. It comes from the church and the way the church has treated people in the past, and especially those who are dealing with issues that the church labels an abomination or sinful. And I think it's really important to look at the way Jesus treated people and then compare it to the way the church reaches out to people. You know, we want to sit there and we want to highlight in our Bibles all the things that are good to us and pertaining to us, the blessings and comforting things. But we ignore the rest of the Bible. We don't highlight the things that are important, like loving your neighbor as yourself, going out and feeding the poor, and feeding the poor doesn't mean necessarily just food. It's spiritual food as well. There's people out there who are hungry for love and acceptance and some grace and some mercy, and the church does not give it. Maybe your church does. And I'm not saying that all churches and all Christians in general, but the vast majority, if you're honest with yourself, we're not feeding the sick. I mean, we're not feeding the hungry. We're not visiting the sick. We're not doing what Jesus told us to do, like sell everything you have and give it to the poor. We don't like those type of verses, but we're really good at looking at other people's sins and counting it against them, and they're not welcome in this church, they're disgusting, and the world sees that. That's what the world sees, and that is not at all a loving God or how Jesus would have reacted to anybody. And I want you to look at this message here maybe as when Jesus met the woman who was caught in adultery and they were ready to stone her. All the religious people watched how Jesus would react. And he reached down and he wrote in the ground. And what he wrote, we don't know what he wrote. But he looked at her as everybody dropped their stones and walked away. He said, "Where are your accusers? Neither do I accuse you. Go and sin no more." Well, maybe this message is Jesus writing into the sand to all of you out there who pass judgment on other people. When Jesus died on the cross, he said that he came to seek and save the lost. He didn't come into the world to condemn it, but to blot their sin out. He came to save the world. And the Bible says that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And that means you too. God doesn't look at groups of people. And the big issue nowadays is the LGBTQ community, transgender and gay marriage and gay pride, and the church is just they're so split over this subject, and everybody's afraid to touch it. And that's becoming a real issue, especially with the millennials and the younger generations, because they're an accepting, all-inclusive group of people. And we're not speaking their language. We're showing them a God who is created in our image. We create God into our image, and we feel like he is the judgmental, self-righteous, better than you God, because that's how some of Christians act, like they're better than everybody else. And you're not. You're not any better than anybody else. And God doesn't see a homosexual or a transgender or a drug addict or any type of sinner in a different light than he sees you. He doesn't look at the Christians and say, oh, you know, your pride, your judging other people, your white lies, your gossip. That isn't cute to God. He doesn't see your sin as better than anybody else. You know, there was back in the late 1960s, Lonnie Frisbee was a hippie, and he got in contact with a pastor, Chuck Smith. And Chuck Smith had a disdain for hippies. He just thought they were filthy people. And one day his daughter brought home a hippie. And Lonnie said to Chuck, and I'm quoting Lonnie on this one here. He said, if you want to reach my people, you need to speak their language that they understand. They're looking for all the right things, just in all the wrong places. They are sheep without a shepherd, chasing hard after lies, and the trouble is your people reject them. How can they believe if the door is shut to them? We can only walk through the doors that are open to us, and your church, well, that door's shut. And that struck a nerve with Chuck Smith, because he listened to the heart of somebody on the outside looking in, knowing that there is a group of people out there who are rejected and they're hurting, and the church doesn't want anything to do with them. But Chuck opened his door, and look what happened. The Jesus revolution started. Chuck's daughter said, he let the hippies in and Jesus came in with them. Can you imagine what the church would look like today if we treated people the way Jesus treated people? When he was with the woman caught in adultery, he didn't condemn her. He showed her love and compassion. And that is what changed her to follow him. You know, when you're sitting there and you're talking to a group of people and all you want to do is bash them for the things that they have done that you feel are wrong, and telling them they're an abomination and, you know, they're disgusting and they're vile, why would anybody want to come to a God that viewed them like that? They wouldn't. Let me ask you this. When you got saved, did somebody come to you and say, you know, you are just an abomination to God, and every time he looks at you, it makes him sick? Would you have come to Christ at that point? Or was it somebody that showed you that in spite of all of your sins, you know, we sing songs, you know, that he looked beyond my faults and saw my need. The church doesn't do that. And I'm just being completely, totally honest with you. And it's the truth. And it's something that Christians and pastors need to hear. You need to understand the voice and the language of the people outside of the church, because they don't understand your language. And you think that you're doing good when really we're harming the people. We're pushing people away from God. We're not bringing them towards God. Jesus said we're supposed to be fishers of men. And what does that mean? What is fishers of men? The fish aren't going to come to your church. We are all out there in the world at work and in public places, and the way we react and the way we treat people as a Christian is what's going to get people to hear what we have to say. And if we're going to sit there and judge them, they're going to shut you off. They're going to you're turned off. They don't want to hear a word you have to say. And it's time that the church wakes up. We are the door that Jesus wants to open to the world. And we have to be the people that are going to say, maybe it's time for us to look in the mirror at ourselves, look at how we're treating the outside world. Listen to the people outside of your church walls. Listen to the world. They will tell you exactly what they need and what they're missing. And as a Christian, you have the answer. And that answer is Jesus. And I want to see another Jesus revolution, like we saw in the late 1960s when Lonnie Frisbee, who was a troubled hippie, spoke up to a church and a pastor listened. And I just want to say that I am a Lonnie and I'm looking for a Chuck. I would like to sit down and talk to you as a pastor, as a church, as a Christian, to just listen to the heart of somebody who was on the outside, and just open your door. Let's talk. Let's meet. Let's start a revolution, Jesus Revolution 2025.